welcome back to the AfterHours cast. I'm your host, Francisco. Joined with me today, I have my co-host, Joey. And today we're interviewing Erika Aylward from Boulevard Market in Tecumseh, Michigan. Thank you for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So right now we are drinking, what is this?
This is a Mannequin, which is a New Orin Swift California Chardonnay.
Okay.
So typical Orin Swift style with super big, overblown fruit. Tastes like maybe some lees has been set on the lees for a little bit.
Honestly, could have fooled me. Like, I'm not a big wine drinker. We talk about this. I'm really not big into like IPAs either. So
right.
This stuff's always just an adventure for me. Oh, I mean, I've never turned down drinks, so you know.
So I think Orin Swift was just bought by a huge wine group, and I think that they, you might know some of their most famous wines were The Prisoner and that whole line of wine, and I think they were about a $3 billion acquisition. So if that goes to show you what Orin Swift is doing, and the winemaker is Dave Finney, and so he's done quite a few different projects, and always seems to come out on top. People like his wine, so it's kind of interesting.
That's awesome.
Nice.
It's interesting how the different winemakers will work with different vineyards.
Right.
So it always is kind of interesting to me. You can taste their influence in the wines.
Oh, yeah.
So if you find one you like, you usually find the winemaker that you like.
Right.
And then you can find the different wines that he might make or work with people on or consult for. And so they all have I usually find that they have a particular style, which is kind of interesting.
Do winemakers generally try to stick to one vineyard, or do they change it up a lot?
No. So like one of my favorites is Michel Roland, and he is a Bordeaux producer, and he consults for a lot of wineries all around the world. Okay. But it's always kind of interesting. He'll have a classic style that comes through no matter where no matter where he consults.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. I think one of the most interesting tastings I ever had was it was an Argentinian tasting, and it was a French producer. So lots of French producers and owners in Argentina. And to taste their French wines compared to their Argentinian wines from the same winemaker, you could taste the same style.
Okay.
Right? The same sort of beginning, middle, and finish, but made with completely different grapes. Okay. So the wine felt like familiar and like I know this.
Right.
And yet it wasn't. It was maybe Malbec right?
Gotcha.
So it was very unique and very interesting. So winemakers all kind of have their signature.
Okay.
And kind of the things that they're really passionate about, and then it shows through in the wines that they make, no matter where they make them.
Okay, no matter where they get the grapes from?
Exactly.
Okay.
Isn't that...
That is crazy. You'd think, maybe they'd stick to one, and then that's why it tastes the same, not that it's their own,
And it doesn't taste the same. It's more of... I would say it's more a style.
Yeah.
Right? So...
similar features, not like
exactly
the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it maybe it reminds you of something, right? Kind of like I said, like a middle, like a beginning, a middle, and a finish.
Yeah.
But with different flavor profiles of each one.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which is weird.
Yeah, that's completely different light that's been shed on me right now.
Yeah.
I've never heard of someone describing their wine based on like the maker, especially because we had talked on the previous episode to another person that delves into the winery business, and she was talking about how there's 5,000 different grapes, and they change vastly depending on if you're in California, if you're in Argentina or France. But it's really cool that I guess a maker can use different products and still have a similar finish.
Yeah.
And so I would say that with that style comes certain things that they do at certain points during the winemaking process. They like certain types of wood that they age in. They like a certain age of grape. So even though, say they're making a Bordeaux, right, in
Right.
France that is Cabernet and Merlot and Cab Franc, and they can use some Malbec there. So even though they might be making it in Argentina, they're still choosing to pick the grapes at a certain stage of ripeness. They're choosing to ferment it at a certain temperature. They're choosing to use the same types of yeast, the same types of wood aging.
Gotcha.
So stylistically, they're similar, even though the flavor profile is quite different.
Okay.
Right?
That's
Does that
awesome.
make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and it's only because of their knowledge and their experience and what they say. It's not preference, but yet we all sort of have our preference, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's always kind of interesting. So it's like they want a certain outcome. So they're going to go with the knowledge and experience that they have.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and if you taste other Orange Swift or Dave Finney wines, they can be stylistically very similar.
Gotcha.
And you kind of taste it and you're like, this tastes like something I've had before. I wonder if this is, you know what I mean?
Right.
And he likes a certain shaped bottle. He likes, right? He likes different things. And so you can kind of come to recognize like, oh, I think this guy's the guy that made this.
Does he usually have these unique type of drawings on the...
No, not at all. He has the Locations brand, which looks like, the bumper stickers that are like maybe an E for España for Spain or an F for France.
Okay.
His location wines, so he brings in, he's what would be considered like a negociant.
Okay.
So a negociant often will source grapes from all over the world, and they'll pick places and estates that they really like, and then they'll make their wine from those grapes in whatever style they're choosing to make.
Okay.
So they could make a California style wine, but from all Spanish grape. So it's, the ingenuity and the kind of independence of winemaking is really like interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Except in France or Europe, where they have their ideas about how they should be done, and they don't veer off of those.
It's done that way.
It's
no matter
very
what,
different.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and I appreciate that too. I always
Yeah.
think that's interesting.
It's a little like old world thinking, right? Like just don't change what's not broken.
Yeah, everybody loves it. Yeah, why change it?
Yeah.
Well, and I find that, owning a wine shop and helping people to understand, right? You come in and there's hundreds of different bottles of wine. And so people revert to doing two things. They choose by the price that they want to pay, or they choose by the label that catches their eye, right? So what Europe took out of that equation was getting subpar wine. So basically, these areas, take Burgundy, for example. So Burgundy is kind of in central France, and they predominantly grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And there's a couple other things that are out there, but those are their two main things. So if you get a $15 white Burgundy, it's going to be this particular style.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
So the profile might change because it's a different vintage. So maybe some years it's warmer, so the wine the grapes are a little bit riper, and it might be a little bit more fuller. And on years when it's cold and it's a little bit less ripe, it's going to be a little bit leaner, and it's going to be, a little bit less of that like kind of Chardonnay fruitiness.
Right.
But you can go and you can pick out a white Burgundy, and you are getting this quality.
Right.
And then the quality goes up from there. So the price is based on the winemaker's costs and what quality grape they're picking. So the very first picking, the prime, is going to be the most expensive, and they use the most expensive barrels.
Okay.
And it's the wine that's the most cared for. The $15 ones are the ones that are the last pickings. They're aged in stainless, and they're really great. There's not a thing wrong with them, and some people really, they like those for maybe every day, because you're not going to spend $100 on a Wednesday.
Of course.
You know? But the ticket is you can count on it.
Yeah.
You can count on it being a specific style, a specific profile, and a specific quality.
So that's in Europe, correct?
That's in Europe.
So like here, it's a little different because price doesn't necessarily mean as much, right?
It doesn't mean as much, but it's kind of just a free-for-all. You know, so you can get 15 Chardonnays that are all from one area. I mean, literally, there might be a 15-mile span of growing area.
Right.
And every one of them is as different as can be from the other.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that they're not all good, but it doesn't mean that you could pick one off and it's going to be the style that you want and that you like.
So it's more of a 50-50. You just don't know.
And you were maybe 20-80.
Yeah.
Right? You're
Yeah.
like, okay, butternut. I'm going to assume this is aged in wood and it's buttery.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you don't know.
Right.
So I think that's always kind of, I think it's always a little bit of a challenge with American winemakers that I wish that maybe they could be a little more of a cohesive group and not be just such wild cards all over the place.
Yeah.
So that you can learn to depend on maybe a certain area versus a brand.
Yeah.
Right? Because as brands grow, their value grows, and then they become part of a large group that isn't as interested in some of the hands-on winemaking and hands-on growing and the small production methods as owners and vineyards and right. So it kind of takes some of the like charm out of it.
Yeah.
Authenticity.
Yeah. I feel like you kind of miss that.
Right.
Where you're like, well, I'm just supporting another big conglomerate and
Right.
And do they do a good job? Maybe. Do they lab test their stuff to repeat it every year? Maybe. Are they adding some things that are like bulking it up or manipulating it a little bit to have a certain profile? Maybe.
Yeah.
Right? Like, wow, that's really purple. Right. Like, how is this, Pinot Noir purple?
Yeah.
Right? This should be a light red garnet color.
Yeah.
And instead, it's almost black.
So they put something in it.
So they might add a few things to, make it a certain profile that people like and want.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of some of what it loses. But that's just my opinion.
Gotcha.
All right, so that was awesome. Super educational. I did not know anything that makers had their own touch and just all this different stuff that you can handpick grapes from across the world and make it into your own style.
Absolutely.
Stuff like that. But I really want to know.
We should preface it with a few things.
Well, no, not just that, but I would just like to get like your origin story. Like, how did you get into the business? Where did this passion come from? And, stuff like that. And tell us more about your shop as well.
Sure. So it was kind of interesting. I was born and raised on a farm in Michigan. And, my husband and I were high school sweethearts. And we happened to be at a time in our life where we had the opportunity to open a business while he was still working, and if it wasn't a go, if it failed, like a lot of businesses do in the first year, that we were able to recover financially. So that was kind of what made us start to think about having a shop. We were really passionate about food, excited about traveling, and kind of experiencing a lot of the world through, like a lot of cultures through their food. We like that food kind of transcends most cultures, socioeconomic issues, just a lot of things. Like everybody loves it and gets excited about something in food. Right. We had 3 young daughters at that time, so it was something that we could all talk about and kind of have a part in it. And be interested about as they grew older and became teenagers and things, you don't always have a lot in common with your parents when you're 15.
Yeah.
But food was kind of good. This was also in 2004, which was a time of really big growth. Like Food Network was brand new. You were seeing a lot more importing, a lot of interesting things happening in the food world. So it was a good time to start our company. So we mainly started with just cheeses because that's what we were really excited and passionate about. In a small rural town of 8,000 people. Hello. And, every day customers were coming in and saying, but what about the wine? What about beer? What about all of these other things? And so we had to really step up our game and decide to carry wine. I knew nearly zero about it other than the basics. And this was back before the internet was even good, where you could just Google stuff and kind of try to
figure it out easy.
Exactly.
Oh my God. Imagine trying to go through college without the internet.
I mean, it's like, hello, what did you people do before this? Like, you had to know this knowledge, or call somebody who did. So we were super fortunate, and I really, I think it's a little bit old school of me, but one of the things that I think is amazing is you've got all of these distributors in Michigan that are wine salesmen, and they're experts, right? Mm-hmm. So they would come and see me, teach me all about wine. And you kind of start to learn, like, the things that you like, the things that you don't like. For me, food has always been about being super open-minded, right? Like, the world in general should be this way. Accept it until, for whatever reason, it might be unacceptable. Yeah. But try everything. Why are you so worried about maybe trying something that you don't care for? It's literally one bite and you're moving on to the next thing. And wine was a lot like that. So I would buy cases of wine, and then I would have these sales reps come in and bring in samples and bring in producers and bring in all of these experts. And then later on, we started traveling and going to visit a lot of these producers in a lot of these places to kind of get a little bit fuller picture of what was going on. And so I'm always very appreciative of my reps to this day because they bring attention to new things. They bring attention to a discussion just like we had about Warren Swift, about how it's sold, about what the company is like and what it's become in 10 years, or if it's even been that long. And so then all of a sudden, it's kind of wine in general and cheese as well, because it's a natural, right? Like, these are all natural products. So it's always changing. Yeah. And so you can't become bored because you no more than finish one vintage and you're like moving on to the next vintage. Mm-hmm. And maybe these areas, so for example, one of my favorite tastings this year was a company called Saint Mont, and they are located at the foothills of the Pyrenees Mountains. So there's only ever been a handful of these people that were putting out wine. They didn't grow a lot. They weren't really into an international market, right? So you'd taste a few things here and there, but not a lot was coming out. And you'd have to find somebody who liked really quirky wine to even buy it. So now here's this producer. They're making amazing wines that are of grapes that are indigenous to that area. They've got, prices at $10.98 a bottle, prices at, $30.98 a bottle, but it's cool stuff. And they're coming to Tecumseh, to my store, to see me. And, he's like, have a beret, and I bought a bunch of wine. And then we introduce it to our customers during the wine tasting with a bunch of Basque cheese and Basque foods. And all of a sudden, like, everybody's drinking Basque, right? Yeah. How fun is that? Next year, it'll all be different, right? Because it's a totally different taste profile for a different vintage.
Right. Ever evolving.
It's like never boring.
Yeah.
And then there's some years where you're like, ooh, gonna pass.
Gotta switch to something else.
Where they didn't have the best year.
Yeah.
And that was great last year, and now now this year is, we're gonna just
move on.
We'll revisit that at some time in the future. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of that. So I think that's kind of the coolness about it. Like, it's constantly evolving and your palate evolves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's interesting too. The things that you kind of become, so you're like, wow, I love this. Like, there's something, I think this is always interesting with wine. It's hard to explain why you like things, right?
Yeah.
What
earthy undertones, No, I'm just kidding. I have absolutely
Exactly.
no idea. Medium body.
Right. So I think it's something that kind of speaks to you on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And maybe that you can't explain. I know this is a little bit woo woo, but someone else kind of explained it to me. Why are we attracted to certain people or certain colors or certain areas, right? It's something that's in our soul or in our DNA.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of the other cool thing about wine in particular and cultures and food is that there's something inside you that makes you love a certain area and get really excited about that, no matter how good or bad the vintage is, because those are things that appeal to you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool too. Yeah. And kind of weird and
Right.
But then you learn those and you're just like, oh, I get really excited when I'm going to buy certain bottles of Rhone wines. My thing is Rhone. And so when it's Chateauneuf de Pape, I'm just like, yes, I can't wait. I'm so excited about it.
Right.
So I think the cool thing is that you can find passion, you can find all those things in something as simple as a glass of wine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a pretty simple pleasure.
Yeah, my dad's pretty similar like that. Like, whenever he gets a bottle of wine or something, or we go out, he'll twirl it in his glass for a good 5 minutes, and then he'll start smelling it. But my dad's owned restaurants in Arizona and Florida and stuff, so he's been around the food game for a while. But
So
he really...
What's his favorite wines?
You'd have to ask him. Like I
Really?
said, my palate and knowledge is so far in its infancy, I don't even know where to begin with wines and stuff like that.
That's all right.
But no, he definitely takes it pretty serious.
Yeah.
So.
It's a thing, isn't it?
It
thing.
100% is. I've seen it throughout my childhood. He's just like, oh, we gotta get that wine. My mom will go to the store and be like, no, don't get that. Don't get that. Trust me, you want the other one.
Yeah.
And he knows. So
I'm good with just a bottle of Moscato,
So I usually drink my wine out of the box.
Yeah.
Dudes, please.
She's like, no.
No.
For anyone listening, she just had the most gruesome look on her face. When I said box wine, she cringed pretty hard.
Well, let me say this. There are some people that are really making box wines now.
Good boxed wine?
Good boxed wine.
Not just Franzia.
Exactly.
Okay.
So why is Franzia, what's so bad about it?
Why is it frowned upon?
Well, so this would be the main thing. These are essentially huge farms. It's not that the grapes are necessarily lesser quality, but they are definitely not grown for any sort of quality purpose.
Okay.
So they're not interested in this cluster and trimming and
or the
all
vintage.
of those things. No. I mean, they're just growing them as bulk. They're harvesting them with big machinery. They're adding whatever fertilizers they need to make for a big harvest. And, everything gets picked up. So you get bird nests, you get, whatever's there, and it all goes into the vat and is pressed and
that's all in your boxed wine?
And that's all in your box wine.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, so it's if you're looking for just, cost is always a subject.
Yeah.
And I think you can't ignore that budget is important.
Right.
But I think they are the least quality, sustainable, fermented beverage you could possibly buy.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And so I feel like it's great for volume, but
Past that.
But, at some point, you can find something a little bit nicer for not much more cost that somebody is actually caring about all the things that go into it.
Okay, that makes
You know what I
a lot of
mean?
sense. And yeah, for the extra $1 or $2, you get something that
Exactly.
doesn't have bird nests.
Exactly. Yeah. Or dead birds or
Yeah.
bugs or, we're just like,
Whatever it could be in a field.
Yeah.
Or vineyard.
It's exactly what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're just like, yeah, I'm going to pass on that.
Might have to pass on the next fraternity wine mixer.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I know.
Sure.
It's like vodka's cheaper.
Yeah,
Let's just...
Can't go wrong with beer.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just kind of, those are the only things that I kind of look at, because people will say all the time, like, oh, I can't taste the difference between something that's $15 and something that's $50.
Yeah.
So, I would argue with you that just because you're inexperienced doesn't mean there isn't a taste difference. Mm-hmm. That's the first kind of thing that you have to consider. The second thing that you have to consider is most places are not just pricing their wine based on a good marketing campaign or a little bit of press. They're basing it on how much human effort goes into all of these bottles. Yeah. They also base it on how much they produce. So some of these European producers, I mentioned the Saint Mont from Basque, France, and I mean, literally some of their vintages were 750 cases.
Wow.
So if you're hiring vineyard managers and people are picking all of these things by hand, you're waiting for your vintage to ferment and you're bottling and you're shipping across the ocean. I mean, it's going to be a little bit more than
box wine or Moscato or something.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's a little bit, I think the human component plays a little bit of a role in that. Mm-hmm. And you actually have something that someone made.
Yeah.
Instead of, okay, well, we've put it up in a lab and this is the profile. And so we might add a little sugar to bring up this flavor. And then we do a little of this to bring up that. Right?
It's not like that.
It's not like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, while you might not be able to taste the difference if you don't drink wine all the time, still there's something to be said on the back side of the price tag. It's not always the true, but for the most part it is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've had like a $400 bottle of dry red wine, but I'm not a big dry red wine guy. So I tasted it and I'm like, I'd rather have the $10. But you saying that makes sense now.
Right.
Because I don't really know like anything about dry red wines.
And if you don't, if it's not your thing and you don't really appreciate it yet anyway, like, why?
Right, exactly.
Right? You're going to be like, ugh, it's cottony. It makes me feel like, ugh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is this vinegar?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that it's just getting there, right? It's just getting there.
That's part of the fun, though, don't you think?
It is.
Evolving your palate and just learning what you like, what you don't, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And, I always get excited about learning what other people like. Because I think that's kind of part of the challenge in a shop like ours. We don't carry a lot of big name brands. So, to kind of, have a real conversation with another person to say, what do you like? And it's not being judgmental. Like you like Moscato. And Moscato is some of the most beautiful wines from Italy that they make. I mean, It's delicious and it has its place and they're fantastic. So it's not about judging that you haven't gotten to a certain point. Like some people will say, oh, I only drink dry red. And I'm like, you're literally missing out on 75% of the wine production in the world by thinking that you've reached this culmination when you can appreciate everything.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not just one. It's appreciating all of it.
Yeah.
It might not be something that you want to have a bottle of, Vinsanto super sweet dessert wine from Italy. You're not going to drink a whole bottle of it. But so I think that it's always fun for me to be able to be like, they're like a little project. Like they get my curiosity where they're like, oh, I like this. And,
You're like, oh.
And I'm like, ooh, what can we give them that is like so weird and like so funky and quirky, but like still fits in their little flavor profile, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're like, I don't know. I'm like, you should do it. I know. So it's like they can take a little bit of a risk for $12 or $20 and kind of come up with some really cool stuff that they've never tasted before and be challenged, but still love it. And that's cool, right?
Yeah.
Like who doesn't want that? We want to be challenged as people.
I'll wait for you to get back to the mic.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
It sounds like you're like down a hallway. If you're not within a foot of the mic,
Okay, sorry.
it sounds like you're down like a hallway. It's weird.
Okay.
Oh, don't worry though. Just like
We can't listen to them click and clack and start. I mean, then they'll start barking.
All right, that's fine. Also, if I go like this, it's just because like I want to add a point on. We did this on the previous show, just to like notify me and Joey so we don't like talk over each other.
Okay.
And you're welcome to just like keep going, but I will like put my finger if I want to contribute something, and you two feel free.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, you can just go as long as you want. I mean,
Okay.
it's your show.
I think.
But me and Dan do that.
That's
It's
nice
like a
because
little-
if you want to add something, because everybody
Yes.
kind of could be wanting to talk at once. I mean, it's how it goes sometimes,
It is, yeah.
So,
If it was on YouTube, it would be different because then you could see
Yeah.
you could see people talking cohesively.
Yes.
But if someone's listening in their car, it might be a little jumbled. So
Yeah. I
we do
agree.
do that, yeah.
Sounds good.
it makes sense.
Anyway, where we left
for it.
off was well, I don't even know what you're saying. You're talking about
Kind of just
the
the
adventure,
challenge of
the
selling.
adventure and
Yeah.
selling to new customers and
Yep.
stuff. So yeah.
Perfect.
So what do you think would be a good starter pairing cheese and wine for someone that's just trying to get into the field? Also, I mean, not even that, but what is your favorite cheese and wine pairing at the moment?
So mine is always like the oddest stuff. So I never tell anybody like this is kind of my passion right now because it's always things that people are like, ew, weird. Like I would never eat that, So I have to say one of the really cool things that I've been tasting lately that I think are fun are some wines that are made in the French Alps. So they're at the foothills of the Swiss Alps. Mm-hmm. And they're really like interesting indigenous varieties that they've got some dry reds and some dry whites. And then all of the Swiss cheeses from those areas are really going great. And I think they're nice. There's a couple of differences. We tend to try to eat seasonally, right? There's things that taste better in the winter than they do in the summer.
Fair.
And so, like right now, we've been doing fondue and lots of like cheesy potato dishes because it's January. And so those wines pair really well because they're kind of from the same region.
Okay.
So truly, the best pairings tend to be white wines and lighter reds with cheeses and foods. So when you start getting like really big California Cabernets that are like, and not just Cabernet, but like Zinfandels and Petit Syrahs and Syrahs, California loves to do this like big extracted concentrated wine, right? They taste jammy and they're spicy and they're all these things. The challenge with that is that you can hardly taste anything else once you've tasted them. And they also make foods that are essentially fatty taste really flat and flabby.
Okay.
And it goes both ways. The food makes the wine taste that way. The wine makes the food taste that way. So say you've got a big ribeye steak that's perfectly marbled. All of a sudden your wine's like, ew, it's flat. Yeah. It doesn't have any life left. And that's the fat. So you're always a little better to pick a red that is a little bit lighter and has some acidity to it.
Okay.
So Pinot Noir is always a good, like Willamette Valley Pinot Noirs are always really good food-friendly wines. Chiantis, so any Sangiovese, wherever they come from in the world. Later done Cabernets and Merlots from maybe France versus California. South African wines are always interesting and fun. They do a lot of European varietals, but they have a lot of brightness and acidity and a little more European styling than, say, Chile or Argentina, where they tend to be a little more New World, where they're big and bold and peppery and all those things. White wine is always an amazing pairing with most food, white or rosé. So they have all of those things. They have balance, they have acidity, they have they can have body depending on what they are. If they've got a little oak aging, or they put them on lees or do like what they call malolactic fermentation, where they change some of the sugars into acid, and it adds a little bit of weight and body. So you can find whites that are kind of oily. Like some of the whites from the Rhone region are big and full and stony and like oily feeling. So those are always a little bit better food-friendly wines. Whites are much easier to pair with cheeses. Champagne is always a great idea. Always a great idea. Champagne goes really well with most food. Or like even, so if you aren't getting real champagne because it can be quite expensive, then you can find something all over the world called Method Champenois or Method Traditionnel. And so basically meaning they're making it in the champagne method with champagne grapes, which are Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. But it's not from that region, so you're not paying that same price, and you're not, but you're getting the same style, same style, same winemaking technique.
That's probably what I had on New Year's. I
Exactly.
definitely wasn't spending $50 a bottle or anything. But I did have a couple bottles of like $15 champagne.
Oh, and they're making them all over, and they're delicious. I mean, you're just like, this is delicious. It's super fun. One of my favorite brands is a champagne producer. So they own champagne vineyards, but they also make wine out of New Mexico, and they're called Gruet. You're like, how does New Mexico even have water? But okay.
It's not Flint, but yeah.
Exactly. But, and their stuff is beautiful. And it's $15, $17. So you're getting real champagne experience at a great price.
So what about like Andre's champagne?
So again, you're kind of going back to that, like, they make millions of cases. Yeah. So, it's not that it's bad quality. It's like saying what is Aunt Millie's bread bad? Yeah. No, it's not bad. But could you compare it to like, an amazing bakery that is, making a sourdough starter and this whole artisan thing? Not really. It's not really the
same. So it's almost better to spend the extra $2, $3 there too.
It is. And get your stuff on sale, or maybe you go to a wine shop that offers you a discount on 6 bottles.
Yeah, it's like 10 or 20% for a case, right?
Exactly. And use the internet for like all of the big magazines and like Wine Folly and Wine Enthusiast and Wine Spectator. All of those put out, kind of like best buys every single month. Yeah. And so you go into the best buy section and you might be getting wines for $10 and $12. It's kind of a regular, average price across the country. And you're getting wines that professionals have said, hey, we taste 10,000 wines a year, and these are really great, and we're rating them well, and they're worth the $12. They're the best buys that are out there. So those are always good resources to check out too, where you're getting good things, you're getting quality, you're getting kind of a great vintage, and you're getting an amazing price.
Okay.
Yeah. Wine clubs, I'm not as excited about. I see a lot of these. And so this is the other thing that goes on in the industry that I'm never a big fan of. You will see many big, what they call like houses. So like Gallo is a wine house, and they own a ton of different brands. Mm-hmm. What you'll see them doing is private labeling. And so that's how these wine clubs exist. So you belong to a wine club and you spend $40 a month, but they're sending you 6 bottles of wine. Mm-hmm. Well, these aren't like places you can go visit, right? Like, you can't. They're just a label front that they've put on a bottle of wine that you don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
So I'm always a little leery of that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And we see it happening more and more. So people will say, oh, I drank this and I loved it. And you're like, well, that doesn't exist.
Gotcha.
And it only exists in Martha Stewart's wine club.
Okay. So how do they get those like specific wines like that if they're part of the like wine club? Like who makes them?
So you don't know who really makes them. They're telling you, well, we have this and it's great, and this winemaker supposedly makes them. But if you can't like go out and publicly buy that brand, is it?
Yeah.
Right?
Another one of those things you don't really know what's in it.
Exactly. And it's a little to me it's a little bit misleading. Now then there's some places like Wall Street Journal and some other ones that do wine clubs, and they're really like on the up and up. Mm-hmm. Like this is what they're kind of getting behind, but you could go to a good wine shop and if they didn't have it in stock, you could order that. Mm-hmm. And it's the real legit deal. Yeah, I kind of feel like I don't like I'm always a little like, really?
Yeah. That would suck if you like had a wine that you had got from Martha Stewart's wine club or whatever, and you really liked it, and then you could not find it in stores or online. That'd be brutal.
And I gave it as an example because that's happened to us.
Really?
And I will say that there's chains of stores that exist, and I won't name names, but one of the things that I think that we're really passionate about, so I didn't mention that as the Boulevard Market evolved, part of our evolution wasn't just in the retail sector, it also became in the production sector. So in 2006, we opened a licensed creamery. So we would make cheese, we still make cheese from locally produced milk. We also make a bean to bar chocolate. So we actually bring the beans from Dominican Republic through their daughter, who's an importer in California, to us and make a chocolate bar. And then we also we're the first and only licensed fermented dry cured salami producers in the state of Michigan. So one of the things that bothers me about private labeling is that it'll take just a minute.
Yeah. They're wild.
Labeling. Just gotta remember that.
So because this is kind of an interesting thing, so I think it'll spur some conversation. So you can interrupt when you're ready, because private labeling is a real thing for me. Mm-hmm. Trader Joe's is a huge one that does this.
Okay.
And I understand what their buying concept is, but I think it really is a bit shady and shitty. So that will be okay. Shall we get back to it?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the challenges with private labeling is it kind of goes against our openness about who is making a product, who's making it, where what are the ingredients, where are the ingredients sourced from, and then who handles it on a production chain, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I feel about the private label wine. And I feel that same way about private label foods and cheeses, is that they're not always disclosing the things that are important. They're also not giving that producer credit, right? And isn't that kind of what they need to succeed? And isn't that part of then their identity as well? Is we're making this and it's really great, but we can't tell anyone because we've contracted to produce this private label thing.
Yeah.
And nobody really knows.
Yeah.
It's distributed out of da-da-da.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? That
Doesn't help anybody.
it doesn't help anyone.
Yeah.
And I don't think it helps the world of food and beverage either by kind of being a little shady. It's not wrong, but I like to see a person behind the organization.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
So I have a question for you. We were talking a bit earlier, and you said, I don't want to mislabel it as a wine club, but you have wine tastings virtually, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, so totally different.
Okay.
So we use a Facebook group as a forum to taste and discuss wine together virtually.
Okay.
So we have a predetermined wine for the week, and then anyone, whether they're drinking or not, like some people just maybe want to listen to what other people's opinions are or listen to the information. We agree to meet at a certain time. I go live. Sometimes I bring a guest, like maybe it's a salesman, maybe it's a producer, maybe it's whatever. And we taste and discuss the wine together. Usually I try to give a brief history of, why I think it's interesting, how it's grown, how different it is maybe in the world of wine or how the same it is. The predominant grapes and the taste profile. And then maybe what it pairs well with. And then you get down to the business of
Oh, my bad. I wasn't pointing over there. Are you trying to plug your laptop?
No, I was trying to look for my phone, but it's fine.
Oh.
I was just looking. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just looking around. I'm like, I really don't know where it is.
I thought you were looking for an outlet for a second there.
No, I'm good. My laptop's still at 30%, so
Okay.
it should make it. That's a good.
Sorry for cutting
that's
you.
okay.
But also, two things. One, be careful when you hit your hand on the table.
Oh, does it?
Close to the mic.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
that's why I put it on this because our last one we had wood too, and it was going like
No,
that.
we had glass.
So glass.
Oh.
We were on a glass
time.
table and we had
And
glasses.
you can hear it clicking every time.
Every click. I mean, you can cut it out mostly, but it could still be a little. If you pay attention, still noticeable.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why it's nice you have these because it's
Okay.
it doesn't make any noise.
So I'll make sure not to
I was just
do
saying,
that.
be careful hitting your hands
Yeah.
on the table. Second thing, though, please plug your Facebook and where you guys do this.
Yeah, I totally will.
Yeah.
Please
Okay.
do. Yeah.
Because I think I'm going to start running it actually through just Boulevard Market because the group thing is fine, but it's so much more work.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be kind of really useful, but I think it's the most useful through Boulevard Market for people who aren't committed.
So you're gonna are you gonna do it at Boulevard Market, or are you gonna make it Boulevard Market Facebook or?
So right now it's a Facebook group called Boulevard Market Virtual Wine Tasting.
Okay.
But we're just going to in 2020 it'll be through the Boulevard Market just on Facebook.
Okay.
So we won't have any additional groups. We'll just do it straight on our page.
That makes sense.
So usually we have a week where we're here's our wine choice. And this is when we're going to start tasting at 7:30 on Tuesday night.
Okay.
We hope you'll join us. And it's a nice way for people to learn about wine, but also to not feel, everyone has different tasting experience. So, you might think that something tastes like a raspberry gummy bear. I haven't eaten a raspberry gummy bear in like 40 years, so it doesn't taste like that to me. Right. But it doesn't mean that it's a wrong tasting. And maybe someone else, by hearing you say that, could then click and say, hey, I know what that tastes like, and that sounds like something I might enjoy. So we try to do it that way. I think it's also nice when people don't have to leave their home. They're spending only a small amount of money, or maybe they're gathering together. We know a lot of people that buy a bottle and they get together with their friends and they all taste and watch together.
That's pretty cool.
That's kind of fun. Nobody feels ashamed about not knowing, right? Because you have a little bit more protection with the screen. You could be in your pajamas. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
You can pause it if you want, right? Like, you don't have to comment. You can just watch. I also think it might encourage you to be a little bit braver. Like, okay, well, we had 50 people watching, and 30 of them loved this, and maybe I'll love it too, and not feel quite so concerned about what people think and what you like, and you're maybe a little more willing to try it when other people have enjoyed it a lot.
Right.
And I think that's kind of something good too. So it's been a lot of fun. It's always interesting, and like I said, we try to have a little backstory so people get maybe a little excited about the wine geeky part of what it is.
So what exactly do that you do? Just tell them where it's from, what vintage, like all that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we'll talk about something, but yeah, we do like where it's from, the taste profile, what else you might like. So if you tasted one wine from here, well, they're also growing it in Spain, and it's going to be similar, a little different, but you might want to try it there too. Like that would be something like your next step in their voyage.
Oh yeah.
So usually when people, my bad.
No, you're good. That was the whole reason I did it.
Yeah.
Just so we wouldn't do this. But it's all good.
My bad. But so when you're like getting people, introducing them to wines, what do you usually start them with? Let's say it's their first time drinking a wine. What would you start with?
People always like sweet first.
Yeah.
Always.
Work your way down, just like kind of coffee. You start off putting a pound of creamer, then you drink it black after 10 years.
Exactly. And so usually there's kind of a good progression. Like most people start with a sweet white wine, like Moscato. Your next step might be a German Riesling, where it's a little drier, that's a little more interesting. It's got some stoniness and things for the, right? Then you're going to go into Sauvignon Blanc. From Sauvignon Blanc, you might try Chardonnays or something drier yet. Then you can start getting interested in reds. Now there's a lot of, if you want red wine for the health benefits and you're not really excited about drinking the dry things, there's lots of sweeter options that aren't sugary. They're not fake. They're not gross. And so you can always start with that too and work your way into some things that are a little bit drier. But you don't have to love the like crazy, super dry. I mean, one of our favorite little reds is kind of like it goes hand in hand with Moscato. So it's from Piemonte, Italy. It's called Brachetto. And it's a little like not super sweet red that's kind of like fresh raspberries, and it's super nice.
Right.
And it goes well with really spicy things like spicy barbecue or spicy Thai food. Why not try something like that? Like sweet wine isn't that you're inexperienced. It's still quality.
But it just goes with different things.
Right. Maybe you pair it with a few different things, and maybe you pick the better quality that isn't just sugary. You pick the well-made, really nice one. Right? So those are kind of the two things to think about.
So I have a question. On bottles, is there any indication as to whether it's bitter, acidic, sugary? Is there any like measurement for that?
There is. So there's a couple of things. So think about the basic laws of fermentation, right? You take a grape, the sugar is converted to alcohol. While that process takes place, the process of fermentation, it creates some carbon dioxide. So that's why Sweeter wines tend to be lower in alcohol and often fizzy because they're still in the process of fermentation.
Okay.
So by bottling, they're literally stopping the fermentation process, and when you open it, it's still fizzy and bright. And they're going to be somewhere in the range of anywhere from 5 to maybe 8.5%, 9% alcohol. Once you start getting above, 9%, it's going to be progressively drier until you get to a typical white is going to be somewhere in the range of like 12.5 and up in alcohol. This is a perfect example of what we talked about in the beginning when we talked about Orange Swift in California and super extracted, right?
Yeah.
As that all happens, you get to a level of fermentation that the alcohol is so high. So a typical white wine alcohol content should be somewhere in about 12.5%. This mannequin that we're tasting is at 15% alcohol.
Gotcha. That's why I'm feeling it.
Right. I mean, but it's so true, right? So a well-balanced, non-concentrated, extracted craziness would be 12.5%. That's where like your acidity is balanced with the alcohol. You get the optimum flavor. You get fruit. You get like the whole picture. This, if you notice, is like really full. It feels kind of thick. It's you can almost taste the like sugar underneath.
It's like semi-sweet for being 50% too. Or
Yes.
15%. It's semi-sweet for that,
But so it's sort of like that residual sugar is still in there, right? Like,
Yeah, you think it like compared to like, a sweet red wine that's only 7-8%. This is sweet for 15%. You can kind of taste like the apples, the oranges, whatever, they put in it. You can almost taste that,
you can feel it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I tell people to look for is if you want something sweeter, go low alcohol. If you want sort of the nicest, most well-balanced, well-made wines that aren't crazy, pick something 12.5 to 13.5, 14% at the most alcohol. And that's kind of the best drinking.
There's always like the urban myth that cheap wine and cheap alcohol specifically will give you the worst hangovers. Just out of curiosity, what is your experience with cheap wine and the hangover?
So I'll say this, like I think wine hangovers are the worst.
I think we can
I think
all
we can
agree on that. Yeah.
And you never forget the one that like you threw up on. You're just like, I'll never drink it again because. So I think this is kind of interesting. And this is a whole other realm that we probably shouldn't go into because it's like scientific research and blah, blah, blah. But
That's fair.
let's just touch on this really quickly. One of the things that people love to tell me at Boulevard Market is they're allergic to sulfites. So we're not going to go into the sulfite debate. Okay?
I've never heard of that, so that's crazy.
Okay, so sulfites are naturally occurring in wine, and then many producers will add some sulfites because it's a preservative. It preserves it at a certain point, meaning when you get it say 2 years from now, sometimes vintages aren't released for 5 years.
Yeah.
It's still going to taste the same, even though it might have been transported from Tuscany, right? People automatically think because the label says it contains sulfites, that sulfites must somehow be a bad thing. And so they come in and they say, well, I'm allergic to sulfites and I don't want any wine that contains sulfites. That's what gives me a headache.
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, so let's not talk about anything about the sulfite debate, but let's talk about what gives you a headache. So it is scientifically proven that wine contains a crazy amount of histamines.
Okay.
What happens when you basically have all these histamines in your body, you have like an allergic reaction, right? You get flushed, you start to feel like you're really congested, and you can often get really, really, really drunk feeling on not very much alcohol because you're not only are you drinking the alcohol, but your body feels like it's having an allergic reaction. I always say a couple things. Dilution is the solution for the pollution. That means you should be drinking as much water as you are wine. maybe more.
Okay.
The more diluted it is, the more hydrated you are, the less drunk you are, and the less wine hangover you get. The other part is take half a Benadryl. Really, like I take half a Benadryl before I know that we're going to drink a lot of wine, and it keeps you sober. It keeps you from having an allergic reaction, and it keeps you from having a headache and wine hangover let's be real, in moderation.
Yeah.
In wine moderation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird thing though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
When you think about like how could it happen, but it's all of the same things that you would get in an allergic situation.
You sound kind of like the college EDU classes. You remember taking those freshman
Yeah.
year? It's like, make sure you have 2 glasses of water for every 1 standard drink that you have. Obviously, we follow that to a T at our Bible studies.
Of course.
But that's pretty.
But it does work. Because
yeah.
when you think about like how much alcohol is going through your bloodstream,
Yeah.
if you can dilute it with a fair amount of hydration, it means that you can have a few more drinks. You're not getting the same effects, and you don't have then the same next day effects.
Yeah,
Of course.
Because that's
everything. I believe it's everything over 4% dehydrates your body. So when you're drinking,
Really?
I believe it's 4%. I
that's
could be
interesting.
wrong, but there's definitely a threshold to where the drinks that you're consuming start to dehydrate you as opposed to hydrating as you would think when you consume a beverage.
That's interesting.
So that would make perfect sense, especially if a wine is like 15%.
So what is that? Anything besides Natty?
Yeah.
Natty or Busch Light? You're not drinking one of those. You're
golden.
Yeah, so it's kind of it's kind of interesting. So it seems like it's a lot, but it's definitely because I do think wine hangovers are the worst.
Oh
yeah.
And I also think that the buzz that you can get from wine it's much different than what you get from like grain alcohol.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, no doubt.
Damn, you're going into like anaphylactic shock.
Yeah. It's really
Just
crazy.
allergic.
And champagne, like you can get drunker on champagne than anything else. Read the science behind it, and basically it's because of the bubbles.
Yeah.
And so it is I think it's a little bit more important to be really super hydrated.
Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on champagne and Chambord?
I love them. I know we love champagne anyway, and one of my favorite memories of going to France was like drinking the Cure and the Cure Royale.
Yes.
And like I think that it's just something so luxurious. And I also think that, you might always not have the means or the opportunity to travel. And so something as simple as that, you can kind of be like, oh, I've got a little bit of Paris, or I've got a little bit of France. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have a little piece of cheese and you have a little wine that comes from that area, and you're like, this is really nice, and no traveling required, but you get a sense of place and a sense of maybe adventure just by experiencing the food portion of a culture.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, because they've got to be great. If they can, anybody who can like create champagne, it's something special.
So I have a quick one. So you said about like the sulfite in wines. So what happens if you like don't put that in? Let's say you have a sweet wine and you don't drink it for 10 years and there's no preservatives in it. Is it going to get drier over time, or how does that go?
No, it would really just go bad.
Oh, okay.
It would kind of just be no good.
Okay.
Oh, man.
I've always been super curious about that.
Yeah, so like cheese and wines are similar because they're using bacteria to ferment.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to kind of understand the basics of fermentation. Mm-hmm. So they don't necessarily go bad, but they kind of die.
Yeah. Let's say you make homemade grape juice and that sits for 10 years. Is that going to turn into wine, or like?
It'll just be no good.
Okay,
like
so it's
vinegar.
the same thing.
More
it's the
like
same thing.
vinegar.
Okay.
Right. It loses its life.
Okay.
So I don't know quite how to explain it to someone. Like we talk about brie cheese or
the best
or camembert. Right. They have like about a 30-day life when you open them. So they wouldn't spoil, but the bacteria is what keeps them alive, and it keeps them like tasting good. And then after that dies, it doesn't taste good any longer. You're like, oh, it tastes kind of funky. It's not right. So it's not that it's not spoiled in the true sense. It's just more like it's lost its life.
Gotcha.
So
I know.
Would you say that there's like wines that have the extra sulfite or whatever makes them a preservative, and that's what makes them special? So are there wines that are just like groomed to be 30-year-old wines?
So yes, but it doesn't have anything to do with sulfites.
Okay, I completely missed that page then.
So sulfites are strictly a natural occurring component of grapes.
Okay, but there is something to some wines that makes them last long.
Usually it is the type of grape, the technique that they use. So take, for example, Brunello. Brunello comes from Tuscany. It is always the same process. It's harvested nearly the same time every year. And I mean, over thousands of years of winemaking, they've decided this is what it's going to be. Then it's picked a certain way. It's handled a certain way. It is put in oak a certain way, and it's aged for a certain amount of time before it's even ever released.
Okay.
So in order for it to be labeled Brunello, you have to be within this certain area, and then you have to follow those winemaking techniques exactly. Okay? Then it's labeled Brunello.
Gotcha.
Okay? Then it's released to the market. Now, does that mean it's ready to drink? Not necessarily, right? So it might be that in the bottle, it ages 10 more years. And then wine experts, and it's usually the vineyard owners and other people from that same area, have determined this is the appropriate drinking age because they're constantly testing every year. So they might say, okay, we know that Brunellos usually taste great 5 years after they're released. So once the vintage is 10 years old. So we're going to encourage you to drink this in 10 years. As they're tasting along, they may say, wow, this is still really, in wine terms, it's called tight, especially with red wines, where you open a bottle and you taste it and you're like, there's no flavor. Like, what's up with that, right? So one of the things that brings out flavor is air. So that's why people swirl red wine specifically in their glass, is because as the air gives access to it, it creates a certain level of oxidation as it starts to break down, and it also brings out flavor. Gotcha. So that's also why people decant. As they're decanting, the air is hitting the wine in huge volumes, much more than if they would just open the bottle and leave it. All of a sudden, the wine kind of opens up, and then all the flavors come out. Now, most of those people that are suggesting that are like kind of experts. Yeah. They taste a lot of Brunello. So they can they have a little bit more of an understanding than even I do of, hey, this needs 5 more years, or this needs, I would never be presumptuous like that. It's like, is this great? It might be greater in 5 years. Yeah. Like, I know it after I open the bottle. Like, snap. I could have waited, and it would still be good. So sulfites don't have anything to do with that.
Good to know.
Yeah.
And there is an actual reason that people swirl the wine. I thought it was just like a thing.
It was just like a pretentious thing.
It is. Right.
Subtle flex in the
I
restaurant.
know, that's what I thought, but I guess I didn't know there was a reason behind it, to be honest.
No,
it is. And so that's also the reason for, so there's a few different reasons, like maybe you want to talk about different kinds of wine glasses. Right? So like, we're drinking this out of a white wine glass. This happens to be stemless, which are they're kind of like basic, kind of common, but I like them. It's easy. So not only is there a certain amount of air in the glass itself, but the way that the glass is shaped forces the wine to touch your tongue in certain spots. And they are the spots that you would gain the most enjoyment of that particular type of wine.
Mind blowing. I never thought like the glass would even matter for a beverage.
So the glass really, and so it really matters. Not as much in champagnes, but in red wine and white wine, it can really matter. And it really matters how much it's exposed to air and kind of all of these things. And so it's kind of interesting if you ever read, like sometime when you just don't have anything else to do, kind of Google like how your tongue tastes. And it'll give you a great idea about how you don't want the red wine hitting at the spots that you have the most bitter taste buds, right? Because all of a sudden you'll feel like it's more bitter than it actually is. You know, you want it to hit at a spot where you're tasting all of the sweeter, and so you get all that fruit first and not, So it's kind of an interesting deal.
That makes sense.
There's a lot that goes into it, and it's why there's like 50 different kinds of tasting glasses.
That's something I've never done.
Yeah, I know.
That's just crazy. Wild. Yeah.
Well, the other day, actually, from your store, I had those the chocolate toast things with some brie and some like semi-sweet red wine.
Oh,
great combination.
So good. I know, isn't it though?
Yeah, I'm not even a big chocolate fan, but they were the chocolate cherry, right?
Yes.
The little toast with a little bit of brie and that semi-sweet wine.
And isn't that perfect?
Was so perfect, yes.
And so it's like, so you can find great pairings that work really well in the profiles of things that you like.
Right. I would never have thought, like, I'm not a big chocolate person or cherry or, like, I love brie, but the chocolate cherry mixed with, like I said, the red wine and the brie, that was just amazing combination.
Those little crisps, they come from Vancouver, and they're, like, a ridiculous price. But they're so, like, the perfect, like, sweet, savory, like, cheese little vehicle you could ever imagine.
Yeah, they were amazing.
They are amazing. I know. People love them. But I think that kind of goes to show you, like, it's kind of interesting to have a thoughtful pairing.
Yeah.
Contrasting flavors versus just sweet on sweet on sweet is too much.
Yeah.
But if you have something that's a little bit savory, and then you have the cheese that's, like, a little bit salty, and then you have the wine that's a little bit sweet and maybe a teeny bit fizzy, like, all of a sudden you've got, like, the fizziness clears away the creaminess where the brie could be too creamy. And then the salty, savory parts complement the sweetness.
Yeah, no, it was an amazing combination. Like you said, it just all the flavors together, you know, I couldn't stop eating it or drinking the wine.
And I think those are, like, if you look at some of, like, the top cuisine in the world, it's usually because they've brought together several components instead of layering the same components on top of one another.
Yeah.
And I think that's always it's, like, important, and it's a grown-up thing to, like, understand.
Yeah, like your palate, like a few years ago, I would have been like, oh, I could not even taste any of that. Now it's like you get older, your palate changes, like, wow, that's actually great.
Yeah,
Even though, like I said, you know, I would not have liked any of that stuff just on its own, but together it just
makes it that much better. So I think those are always important things. And I think we can look to a lot of, you know, I love that about restaurants. I love it about, like, I know you guys are really into, like, the whole bar crawl, the mixed drinks and those kind of things. So when you think about those layers of flavors, it's like kind of all what complements each other. Even in mixed drinks, you've got bitter components, you've got sweet components, you've got sour components. And so together they're a better combination than they would be if you just had, you know, sour.
Yeah, like a Bloody Mary. I don't like tomatoes or pickles or any of that, but together,
wow,
amazing.
There's something, I know. But then you have a little sweet, you have that, like, weird, like, spiciness to it, and then you've got the pickly, like, vinegary.
And it's just, like, it's refreshing, you know? It's like you wouldn't think, like I said, pickle juice, like, plain, I'm like, oh, gross, but in a Bloody Mary, you're like, wow, you know, this is pretty
really
good.
Yeah. I know. I was just talking to someone today, and we have a couple, so we carry a couple, like, locally made Bloody Mary mixes, like the Brutes. We really like the Brutes brand.
Yeah.
I bought it because it had a Chihuahua on the front. You know, I have little dogs. But they just came out with a Caesar one. Ooh. So it's got some anchovies in it. It's got, like, some pickled jalapeno juice, a bunch of, like, different cool things. And we're just, like, loving it.
It's pretty good then?
It's really good, yeah.
You never know. You can put pretty much anything in, you know, a Bloody Mary mix, and it could turn out good. You know?
Or bad.
Or bad.
Like,
or bad. Yeah.
You're like, somebody just kept adding things.
Yeah, it's like you that's one thing, you never know what you're getting. You know, you order a Bloody Mary from a different place. It could be everything or nothing.
I know. I know. Well, one of my favorites has been the Old Bay brand. And if you've had that,
I have.
Oh,
Yeah.
Don't you love it?
Yeah, it's good.
And you're just like, oh, like you can just have so many cocktail shrimps just on the skewer and that. And you're just like, this is the life.
It's great.
So even us, not everything is about wine for us.
Yeah.
We do a lot of different, we carry so this would be a whole different conversation, but it's something for you guys to explore that I think is unusual. We carry a whole line of wines that are considered aperitifs, or like on the vermouth or on the Amaro status.
So that's like, vermouth is like a cooking wine, right?
It's not.
Manhattan's.
Really?
It's not. So vermouth and aperitif and port and sherry are all part of what's considered like a fortified wine.
Okay.
So it means that they're usually on the sweeter side.
Mm-hmm.
And then they stop the fermentation with grain alcohol. Okay. So it starts as wine, they ferment it to a certain point, then they add the grain alcohol. And the grain alcohol is like a neutral spirit, and it stops the fermentation. It like immediately stops it in that spot and preserves it. Then they might add, in the case of vermouth, they might add like herbs and different botanicals to get a certain flavor. In the way of ports, they might let it age in bottle, they might let it age in barrel. So each thing is a different grape, right? Mm-hmm. So you kind of got all these different things. But that is like a kind of whole world in and of itself. And so they're used as, maybe you mix it with some soda, maybe you mix it with some Prosecco or champagne. Maybe you mix it in a martini. Maybe you drink it straight on the rocks. Maybe, it's like kind of an after dinner or before dinner. So there's kind of like, there's not a lot of rules, but they kind of have their spot that they fit in. And they range in alcohol from anywhere from 17 to 20%.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've had a vermouth before, and it seems to taste way different than anything you could ever taste. Like, I can't even put like a finger on the taste, because I was like, it's like super dark too, it seems like. I don't know.
So they make white, they make a blanc, and they make a rosso, so white or red, and then they make a dry.
Okay.
And then some different producers are the whole spectrum. Most people, when they especially when they start to get really into like making their own martinis, are like, well, I only use da-da-da. Yeah. Right? Like, my favorite vermouth is Dolin.
Okay.
And it's a French vermouth, and it's kind of a small place, and I think they do a great job. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of an interesting like netherland of, it's technically considered wine, but you're really encroaching into the spirit world. And they're really interesting. So they can have lots of like dessert properties, and then they can have lots of like really weird savory properties too. Mm. So they're kind of a fun like exploratory thing where like maybe you want a more cocktail experience, but you don't really want to have the spirit aspect of it. One of our favorites is, you might know it, is like an spritz. It's like what's considered an Italian spritz. So it would be like a bitter orange fortified wine mixed with some Prosecco and a little club soda. Okay. And if, and they're yummy. Like, especially when it's like 90 degrees, you just like sit with a bowl of Lay's potato chips and you're like, yes, this is my life. Right. It's like, and that's what they do all over Italy. So you can kind of like have a little Italian experience.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of fun.
So I saw on your website that most of your stuff is European inspired. So, from the wines, I could see obviously that could be a thing. But is there a difference between like the cheeses and meats over there that you've brought over here?
So I think that most of the cheeses and meats originated there. Mm. So the things that are being made here had already been perfected.
Right.
We carry a lot of domestically produced, amazing products.
Okay.
That would be, I don't want to say inspired by, I mean, they're literally making prosciutto in Iowa just like they would in Italy. But it's American made.
Yeah.
So is there a difference? Well, certainly. They have a different breed of of hog. There's all these like small things, but I love that American producers are doing really traditional things as well.
Gotcha.
And the same with the cheeses. We even did that when we first started making cheese. We're like, oh my gosh, we never see this on the market, right? Like this blue cheese that's been washed with this certain thing, and da-da-da-da, because it is vile, right? You make it and you're like, that is the worst thing I've ever tasted. In 4,000 years of cheese making, someone has thought of that.
Yeah.
And they've tasted it and they've said, this is why we're not going to launch that product, because it's nasty. So there's a little bit of that, I think.
Yeah, that's fair,
Yeah.
for sure. Just bringing it back a little bit. I know that you guys have been in operation now for 16 years, correct?
Yes.
All right, and you do have plans to expand.
Well, we're working on the procurement of a new shop, but it won't be anything like Boulevard Market.
Oh, please elaborate.
Yeah, so I think that, it'll be a new learning experience for me. While I've concentrated and focused on wines and really like kind of small production, specialty production, foods, this is going to be a little bit more of a like kind of old school Americana type store. It also has a packaged liquor license.
Okay.
So we'll be getting into the more like spirits and liquor and distilled stuff on this side. So I can't say that I'm not excited to like start sampling some like new whiskeys and scotches and like all this cool stuff that I've not really had the opportunity to sample a lot of or get really involved in it. So hopefully, we'll see this all kind of culminate and come about in the next maybe 6 months or so. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we're kind of excited about it. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
I'm getting.
And that's also here in Tecumseh.
It is. It's just going to be outside. It's an old store that was once owned by Henry Ford. So it's in an area called Macon.
Okay.
It's about 5 miles northeast of Tecumseh. And so it's kind of like just a little jog in the road.
Yeah.
But Ford owned and did a lot of agricultural things in this area and was really prominent back in the 40s for, some different things. So I think that it'll be an interesting adventure into the unknown for us.
Yeah, Joey and I are going to have to come back when that opens. For sure. I'm super excited.
Well, we're just like, give us like the Scotch flights and all these like weird things because we're kind of excited to learn all of these,
Oh,
yeah. And I think it's just the same sort of thing. And then maybe it'll be like, we got to go to Scotland and, visit some producers and just kind of see what's happening,
Oh, darn. Gotta go to Europe.
I know.
So unfortunate.
We loved that part of it. But yeah, so I'm getting excited about it. I think it'll be totally different. And it's we always love challenges. We love kind of that, growing and learning new things. And I think it keeps you fresh and it keeps you moving forward.
Oh, for sure. So as we start to like wind down here and wrap up, what are some things that you would recommend to other people that are going to pursue their entrepreneurial career or their journey?
That is always a question I get asked. And I think that there's a few things that set you up for success. I think that, having a lot of self-discipline, having a business plan, being, pretty realistic about how things are going to go, and understanding that there's a couple of things you can't buy in life. One of them is time, and one is experience. And so if you can outlast those things and, and gain them, it's really helpful. I think that one of the biggest things is you kind of have to adjust, to be willing to change. You have to be pretty open-minded. This has been interesting, right? Like we've got the CBD in Michigan now with the legalization of marijuana. And then I think they've infused every single thing they possibly could with, CBD or hemp. So kind of not being quite so narrow about where you are and what's happening and kind of being like, hey, we're just gonna be a bit open to new experiences and different ways of thought and the changes that the world brings, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I think that we love the traditionalism of the things that we do, but it doesn't mean that people might not look back at this space of time and saying, well, that was really traditional because look at what we do now. So, I guess that's kind of, it's just, you can't just like be stagnant. You have to grow. You have to think about that.
Right.
So I think those are always important things for people. And don't be naive. Business, when they kind of make a little joke about when opportunity comes knocking, it looks a lot like hard work. That is exactly right. I don't think there has been a time in 16 years that we haven't worked 7 days a week.
Right.
And it's not like it's not like we might work all day, 7 days a week, because, right, those are the great benefits of having your own business, is you can do those things. But if you think that there's somebody to lay the responsibility at the door, that is where the buck stops with you. Yeah. And so you make it what you want it to be. And we've been we feel really, blessed is always a word, but we're really fortunate to have a great community that supports us and that is interested in the things that we do. In turn, we try to do the same things for them.
Right.
Offer them great products that are reasonably priced, so that they don't have to order online or go to a big city to pick out. We do a fair bit of community involvement and care about the things that go on in our community. So I think that like partnership is good.
Very
so you
important.
have to be willing to do those things and be community minded and think about the kinds of things that your place needs or your place in the world might need. You guys have thought out your app and you think about, right? You think about how does it...
Of course.
I think this is always the biggest thing in business is most people look at business and think, well, how do I get rich, right? Because I think they're going to be rich, and might want to rethink that. But the other part is, I think the first question you need to ask yourself is, how do I serve other people, right? Because that is, in essence, what your business is how am I serving someone else? And then you have to be willing to actually serve them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. If you don't give, your customers a good experience, why would they come back to you?
Sure.
Of course.
Because Amazon is super convenient.
Oh, yeah. You never have an issue. You get all your stuff within 2 days. If there's an issue, they send it back.
Credit
if something's broken, they don't care. They're sending it right back. That's why they're so successful.
But, but then there's this. That's why they're so successful. But you know what? They're not the cheese shop, right? They don't go in, kind of look around and be like, well, that's cool. I've not really seen that before. And I can have a little taste.
Yeah.
And they cut just to order what I want. And then maybe I want this wine because it's kind of good and I got a sample or it looks really cool.
Right.
And I get to go home and enjoy it right now.
Yeah. You can't get your wines on Amazon.
You can't.
You could. Some of them.
Some of them. But I think it's part of it is like, and I think in an online world, and I have to say this partly because I own a brick and mortar store. But part of your life isn't just a transfer of goods and service. It's not just I go to work and I get paid. I do that, right? Part of your everyday life has to be experiences, because you can't just live on one vacation every day or every year, right? So if you have small experiences that you're like, hey, this is the good life. I've a small piece of cheese. I have some wine I like. I've got some crisps I like. And this is going to be my Saturday night. And I'm having a great experience. And, next time it might be I'm going to this bar and I'm going to have a really superior drink. And that's a great memory and a great experience that isn't just once a year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So it's then you have a happy life and you've got lots of good things to look forward to all the time instead of, well, gee, my cheese came in the mail.
yeah.
It's not very fun.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
for sure.
I don't know. That's always my thought on it. It's kind of cooler when
Right.
have the cheese thing.
Do you want to touch on the new store? You were excited for that?
We are excited. I know. Well, it's been fun. Like, one of my salesmen has been bringing in all of these different scotches and bourbons and all of this stuff, And we're like, why are you doing this? Like, you can't even sell it to us,
Yeah.
And he must have known in his subconscious that, like, we're doing this or something.
There's some very expensive bourbons too. Like, I know just the cheapest bottle of bourbon's what, like $30?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they can easily get up to, $70, $80 easily.
So we carry a wine that is aged in, like, Pappy Van Winkle bourbon. Do you know Pappy Van Winkle?
No.
So people stand in line for 3 days to have access to Pappy Van Winkle bourbon.
Wow.
And they can run thousands of dollars per bottle. Thousands. So you just Google it.
Yeah.
Pappy Van
crazy.
Winkle.
Thousands of dollars?
Thousands of dollars. I mean,
Jeez.
I think like some of them they're like $3,000 for a bottle. Wow. And the fact is they just don't make enough. So it's super limited of what you can actually get.
Yeah.
I think there was a tasting you had to be specially invited to, and it was $85 a shot.
Ooh,
to taste their bourbon.
that's crazy. That's like a shot of Remy Martin or something, That is a lot of money.
Crazy.
But bourbon's also kind of meant to be like slowly drank, right? You're supposed to
Yeah.
sip on it on the rocks or, straight up,
Yeah.
It's not like, a bottle of wine where you just, drink the whole thing.
You can't drink the whole thing.
Yeah.
You just,
Yeah,
you'd be dead.
exactly.
Yeah, so I'm kind of excited to explore a little bit of that kind of stuff.
Right.
It'll be a whole different kind of game, I think. So
Oh, no doubt.
a challenge, no less.
Yeah. A
I'm
fun
like,
one, though.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're always up for it.
Right.
I know. I'm like, I've never sold zigzag papers.
They do sell, though. I can tell you that. They do sell.
It's been hilarious. Like, our market research has been going to visit all of these like weird party stores and gas stations. I was like, huh.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those zigzags, swishers, white owls, they all sell
I
a
know.
lot. They're only $1 a piece, but I'm sure they make up a good percent of the market. No doubt.
Well, it had been like, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit this because, like with Boulevard Market, I can be a little bit sheltered. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, just, it is what it is. But, so it's been like 15 years since I'd been inside a gas station. And I was like, wow, like this is really something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I've been thinking so we've been visiting all these places lately, and they're really, I'm not sure what all these things are for, but I'm like, okay, we're gonna
sell them. We're gonna sell them.
So I'm like, all right, I'm relying on my salesmen and some key players to be like, okay, this is good. And I don't know.
So I had a quick question. You said you started off by, your salesman telling you stuff. Do you still have some of your original salesmen from, you said, 16 years ago?
I do.
Really?
I do. It's really funny. And it's funny to see kind of how the industry has changed as well. But they're all great. You know what I mean? And I really appreciate, I think that's one thing that has really helped us in our business is that we've had awesome people that always want to help us. They benefit by you purchasing, right? But they really are out to help you build a better business so that you grow together.
Right.
And I always really have enjoyed them and liked them. And some are retired now, and some, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we kind of laugh about it, but it's a really small industry. It's kind of weird. You wouldn't think it'd be that tiny, but it is.
How has marketing changed from 16 years ago to now, going from regular marketing to digital marketing, etc.?
It's crazy. The just amount of information that is available to people now. You know, we used to run newspaper ads, right?
You say that nowadays, people be like, newspaper ads.
And you know what? We still do.
Right.
Because there's still a certain amount of people that read a newspaper every week. And you know what? We still buy the local newspaper every week because there's something about opening a newspaper. It's kind of nostalgic. You see people's pictures. It's tangible.
Yeah.
Right? Like the internet, you see it and you can print a picture, but it's not the same as, you know, I remember it's been like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, our chocolate bars, Pepelo Stone Ground Chocolate, was featured in the Wall Street Journal. And our daughter was living in Shanghai, China at the time. And so Gina got the newspaper before we did because it's 12 hours ahead time difference. And like going and seeing a product that you made in the Wall Street Journal with a picture of it is like not the same as seeing it on the internet.
Oh, no
I'm
doubt.
just saying you know what I mean? Like there's something that is so just so cool about that because only a select amount of information could be printed in a newspaper. Yeah. So I think that some of those things I still love and I still find it fun. And our building was built in 1879.
Wow.
Which is really cool. So not super old, but all of the people that have owned it have kept like newspaper clippings, pictures, all of these things. It's like, it's not the same as the internet. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not being old school about it, but it's just more tangible.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. You know, online you have access to everything, everywhere. You get a newspaper, especially the Wall Street Journal, there's, 8 pages and you're featured in one of the 8 pages, where online it's 8 billion pages.
Right. And you could just go and I mean, you could see thousands of pictures of your product, but.
Right. It died, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Sorry.
It's not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same.
Just not the same. So, but not that social media has been great, websites have been great, all of those things are great. You move with it, you learn with it. It's all cool.
Yeah. I've seen your Instagram seems to be pretty up to date. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, I try, but it's, like the vast majority of our people are using Facebook.
Yeah.
We have definitely a little bit older crowd, and that tends to be our
niche.
Well, no, it's just our town.
Yeah.
So, I think that there's just not as many young urbanites because there's not the same jobs, there's not the same anything. So it tends to be just the demographics of that area tend to be older.
Yeah, a lot of the young people tend to move out.
Bigger cities, all of that.
Yeah.
So so that's definitely been the most active part, but Instagram, we try. Twitter, I'm like, I don't know.
That's kind of a millennial thing,
Yeah, and I'm just like, eh. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you get all of these other social ones that I'm just like, no.
There's so many small ones nowadays.
I know.
TikTok, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and then you start to get into other business-related ones, and it's like, really.
I mean, if you, if your target market's mostly on Facebook, there's no point in investing time and resources.
Exactly.
Outside of that.
And
you said,
Instagram.
Right.
Is
Facebook,
great.
Instagram. Yeah. Other than that, I'm sure you do well in digital marketing, So.
It's good. And our website's great. I mean, we sell online, and so that's been a good thing. And so it's always active.
I've also checked out the website. It's very nice. Professionally made. Did you guys make it yourself, actually?
We did.
Really?
Yeah, actually Gina made it. And then
Gina made it.
Gina made it. And then and now I do it and maintain it and change things. And it doesn't look too bad, does it?
No, it looks good. Looks pretty good.
It looks kind of decent. I think there's a lot of we've just discussed it recently where we're like, it's too much. So I've been paring it down, cutting out some pages, cutting out some info.
What do you guys use for it? Did you use a website maker? Or did you?
Yeah, we used Weebly.
Okay.
Of course you did.
Yeah, that's what. Well, I don't know if you know about our second our business, but we're in it's called Winnow Software, and we design apps, websites, stuff like that too.
Oh,
and we've
really?
seen a lot of bad websites.
Yeah.
And we showed everybody yours. We're like, it's pretty solid for a homemade one. Yours and Mickey's actually were pretty well made.
I know, like, I'm not good. Like, we don't have our SEO
Yeah.
stuff.
You're still first when you pull up a Boulevard Market, but
Right.
SEO is very important. We
Yeah.
talk about that a lot.
I know. So in fact, Gina and I were just talking about it when we were there in September, and you know, she works for Trustpilot.
Yeah.
And so we had talked about some different components to kind of put in and the things we need to do. And then I'm like, but does it matter?
Yeah.
You know, because the thing is that I don't really want to foster, like, I'm not trying to grow my online business.
Yeah.
I'm strictly there as a way for people to procure quality things that are from Michigan and that possibly know us.
Yeah. It's more informational than...
Yeah.
Like,
I don't want to become necessarily any more than that. Like, let's be realistic. We make 50 salami at a time.
Yeah.
50.
Yeah.
Do I need to be viral? I really don't. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's all about scaling slowly. I mean, you can't. I mean, if somebody orders 500 salamis, what are you gonna
Right.
do?
That's why I only have 20 available.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
But you know, I don't want to run a meat factory. I
No.
don't want to run a salami factory.
No.
So, you know, there's sort of these things that you do that kind of, I don't want to say hinders you, but it doesn't necessarily open you up to a situation that you can't handle when it comes to online presence and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We have watched a lot of businesses over the years that have made sort of deals with really large grocery chains and things like that, and they've invested a lot of money and they've gotten really geared up, and then, you know, 8 months later, their product has dropped, and they now have, you know, $5 million worth of loans in equipment and in facilities, and they have hundreds of thousands of stock that they cannot sell because virtually no one is buying them.
Yeah.
And they go bankrupt, and it ruins their business. So, you know, it's like we had many times and many opportunities. The Wall Street Journal was one. I mean, we had the University of California, Davis, call us and say, listen, we'll buy all of this chocolate. Costco called us. Sam's Club called us. We want you to come and do this. We want to get your stuff, right? Because of the Wall Street Journal article. And I'm like, you don't understand.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. But that isn't an opportunity at that point.
Yeah.
You would have had to be scaled for that opportunity before that Wall Street Journal ever hit, which means you would have been scraping by, barely selling all of your stuff in order to even, and then can you keep their interest for longer than 6 months? Do you hope that your product is the product that people are excited about? I mean, that's a lot, you know.
And that also drives the price down. If you put it in Costco,
Absolutely.
you know, your product could go from $5 to $2 at Costco. And then even if it gets...
ruins your brand.
And then if it gets out of Costco, then people are still going to want it for $2 and they're not going to buy it for $5.
Exactly. We had this really interesting conversation on a train. We were coming out of London, or we were coming home back to London, and we sat with this couple, and they were marketing people for a French truffle producer located in England.
Yeah.
And they wanted to break into the American market. And number one, everybody always wants to talk to us about politics, which is really kind of funny in Europe because, you know, they hear you're American and they're like, so what about Trump?
Yeah. Of course.
He's actually
He's
visiting
in
Toledo.
tonight.
Yeah, no, I saw that. And so they were really confused about the American market, and like they're like, well, but we want Walmart. We want Walmart because Walmart sells a lot, right? And they have these like high-end French truffles. And I'm like, but you don't understand. That will ruin your brand. Like, no one will touch you after Walmart is finished with you. And they will be finished with you because you're not a Nabisco, a Nestle,
Aunt Millie's
right? You're not a major player, and they had a really hard time understanding that. And so, you know, for us, it's like our website's cool. we sell a lot of stuff to people all over the place that are looking for the kind of things that we sell.
From their point of view, though, they're probably thinking breaking into the American market, and then if it does flop in a year, then they've already made their quick buck. When they can still hold the same prestige overseas. I don't know if there's Walmarts over there or not.
But that was the problem, is they didn't even have the first clue of how much they would need to produce.
Oh.
Gotcha.
Right?
That's millions on millions. Yeah. Especially, going to Walmart.
Right.
But like, even if you make your money in a year, your brand could be done after that year. That's would be probably the downside.
Well, and this was a family company, and they wanted to grow, and they thought growth would automatically be the American market.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of tried to explain to him, well, if you're making a high-end product,
start in a high-end store.
You should be targeting Whole Food. You should be targeting, a series of like maybe small Fresh Time Market or, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not Walmart. Like,
not
that's
to start off especially, yeah.
That's at the end of your life cycle where you're like, okay, I got to dump a lot of truffles, and here's how I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it cheap, and I'm going to make a lot of money, hopefully, and then I'm getting out.
Right, after you already have that $20 million in revenue, and you can afford the $5 million in stock.
Because I'm like, you can't start with your brand there, because no one else will touch it after that.
Yeah.
They just won't.
Yeah. Whole Foods isn't going to want something Walmart selling.
Not necessarily.
For the most
Maybe.
part. I mean, to some extent, but for a lot of the part, the high-end truffles, like, at $7 at Whole Foods and, $3 at Walmart.
Right.
So.
And yeah, it's just kind of a thing. So it was an interesting conversation. So, we always try to be very cognizant when we produce things that we can produce for our store. We can always have it in stock. We can make it for what we feel is a reasonable price for our local customers, right? Where you're not like having to charge top dollar because that's kind of ridiculous. Then your local people can't purchase it, and they're the ones that
run your company, help
support you, and they're also the ones that are raising the pigs. They're the ones producing the dairy milk, right? So those are kind of things that we try to think about instead of getting big and.
Right.
Yeah. An investment in the community is a little bit more important to us than just
complete scaling. Yeah.
And like I said, I don't want to run a meat factory. I can't imagine anything more.
That salami is amazing, though.
It's so good.
So good.
It's so good. But could you imagine thousands and thousands of pounds of it hanging and...
That would be crazy.
Not for me.
Well, actually, John is licensed to make the salami too, right?
Right. Yeah. So, we're the only licensed producers in Michigan. And kind of like wine and cheese, it's a fermented product. So, it's never cooked. So, it's always an odd thing when people realize they're eating meat that's never been cooked.
Yeah.
So, you trust the science behind it, along with our testing, right? To make sure that it's safe. So, you have a couple of things, but yeah, it's been really good. It's been tasting great. It's taken us a couple years to kind of, like winemakers, like you kind of get your profiles down. You kind of know when the right time to do this is and do that is, and it's been really cool. We've learned a lot, and there's been some frustrating parts, but
of course
that's again,
part of business.
Right, you can't everything can't just be super simple. If you don't have any challenges, that's no fun. You know what I mean?
And then everybody would do it too,
right?
And
those are the people that are like drama queens, the ones that don't have any challenges. They've got drama, so we don't have any time for that. But so it's been really, really, it's been a really cool project, and we've really enjoyed not only our own salami, but also meeting a lot of American producers and kind of testing out the things that they're doing, because there's a lot of creative stuff that's happening in cured meats right now. And I think it's, people are using different things than pork, lots of different meats, lots of different kinds of fruits and spices and distilled spirits. And cool. It's all good.
So we're talking a lot about champagne, and the new year has just passed. It's currently the 9th of January, but I think you have some interesting stories to tell from New Year's Eve. What did you guys eat and drink?
Yeah, so we had one of our favorite meals. The first time we ever had it was actually here in Ann Arbor. And then since then, we've eaten it in France a few times. And it's kind of one of our go-tos when you get off the airplane and you don't know where you are and you're just on a jet lag. It is duck confit. Mostly what we see in Michigan being served in, so duck confit is this. It is duck legs that have been seasoned, and then they've been simmered slowly in duck fat until they're fully cooked. Then they are submerged in the duck fat and refrigerated until you're ready to eat them. And it's the skin and the meat, okay? So most of the time you see duck confit in the United States and they've pulled it off of the bones. And so they're serving it like you would see pulled pork. Mm-hmm. But in France, they actually fry the entire leg. And so duck fat in particular makes the most kind of crispy, delicious frying that you can ever imagine. So potatoes, French fries, you name it. It's fried in duck fat. It's light, it tastes great, and it's super crisp.
Making me hungry.
So we had some, so one of the things that we had at Boulevard Market this year were these large cans of duck confit legs submerged in the duck fat, and you got 4 legs in. So that's what we did for New Year's Eve, was we fried the whole legs, we fried a bunch of potatoes, had a little kind of French-inspired side salad and baguette, and an entire crispy, perfectly fried duck confit leg, and a bottle of champagne.
Nice.
Rosé champagne.
Man, that sounds so good.
That sounds so good. I'm just listening
awesome.
to the story. My mouth is watering a little
I
bit.
know. So, like, make that your next meal or goal in life. Like, get to Paris, go to a bistro, eat a duck confit leg. It'll be one of the most memorable things you ever do. Or come to the Boulevard Market, get a can of duck legs, and go home, and for half the cost, you can pretend you're in Paris.
Yeah,
but it was pretty
good
amazing.
Too.
Yeah. So you can find it on some menus of, different restaurants, a lot of French stuff, but always an amazing option. Great way to start out the new year.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
All right, well, I'm pretty hungry. Let's wrap this up. So, What are your socials? Where can people find you?
Oh, you can find us on, of course, Facebook, the Boulevard Market. You can find us on Instagram, and it's Boulevard Market, and Boulevard is abbreviated, so BLVD Market, all one word. You can find us at boulevardmarket.com. And, of course, you can find us in downtown Tecumseh.
Yep. And soon, hopefully, they're in your store within a year, right?
Yeah. And that'll be just a little bit north in Macon. So, and it'll be called, we're keeping the original Henry Ford name, Macon Grocery. So as soon as it has its own social channels, we'll have those out there too, and you'll be able to find them. And then you'll be able to do the virtual wine tasting through the Boulevard Market on Facebook. Just the main page. Don't worry about a group. And that'll start in February.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on the show.
Hey,
appreciate it.
Thank you guys. It was such a pleasure. Sorry if I got too crazy about all the wine
you're
stuff.
good.
Oh, we're good. And that's a wrap?
That's a wrap. Thanks for listening,
Awesome.
everyone.